This is the centre of our new African village. We don't know what we're going to call it yet. We'll work that out soon. That's the facade of the runaway train there. Platform of the runaway train runs up and down there, roughly between those piles of wood. And the train leaves the station, does a big spiral round here, and then goes over the top of the rapids ride there. It then goes over a bridge. See this yellow line along here? Goes through there. Then it does a big spiral down to ground level, the other side of these bushes, and back up over the top of these trees, and then heads off through here. And then over the road, comes around here, along this yellow mark here, and crosses over the top of the rapids ride. This tunnel will be rebuilt and totally re-landscaped. It then heads off down there, so we've got to go round there now to have a look at that. Lost it. Oh, yeah. Down here and into the tunnel. And we come up out of that hole, around here, along there, up over those rocks, following the rapids ride right through that ravine and back into the station. And that's it.
Everybody off on the right-hand side, please. Coming riders, take a seat quickly. One seat in, pull the bar down.
Once upon a time, a theme park was a themed attraction. In other words, there was a specific theme or a group of themes where visitors could be taken on some kind of adventure on that theme. It could be the Wild West, it could be outer space or whatever. And that's really what Disneyland was all about. In Britain, we imported the term theme park, and it has become any kind of amusement park, preferably inland, in other words, away from the sea. Why, I don't know. With a clean-cut image where you pay one price for your admission and then everything is free. And that is what is generally accepted as a theme park.
Theme park is where people can go with their families. It's got a mixture of everything. Rides and stuff for the children and fast rides, little rides, shops, restaurants.
It's a place where you go and have fun and you eat lots of ice cream and you go on the rides and you win prizes like this.
You pay a lot of money to get in to start with, and it's a lot of queuing to get on all the rides when you get in here. And by the end of the day, you haven't got round to everything you want to get onto.
My basic objective is to give people fun. And there are lots of people that knock that, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with a bit of good, simple fun. And those people that set out to build the highest, the longest, the fastest, or whatever, end up probably with a very dull ride. And of course, next year, someone comes along and tops them. What I set out to do is building the ultimate in terms of fun, in terms of the best. Alton Towers have asked me to design 2 new rides. They've done a lot of market research, and it's been decided that a haunted house and a runaway train are what they want. And I've got about £6.5 million to play with. I've completed the design of the haunted house now in outline, and now I'm going to Colchester to see Keith Sparks, Sparks Creative Services, who are going to actually haunt it for me. They specialise in animations and special effects for our industry, and I'm going to brief them on what I want and my ideas.
I think if we heard a lot of water around,
yes,
it'd give a huge wet noise.
Yeah.
That you can't possibly create artificially.
Yes. We want to really pile in the elements.
You could have grotesque fountains.
Yes. Yeah. We can have
Green fountains.
nasty, slimy things coming up out of the swamp. You know, the whole bit.
We should use water, though, I think.
Yes,
Real water.
I think real water.
It's a success.
As sinister as the graveyard is, without being a graveyard.
That's right. Not a graveyard. Not a graveyard.
What's our opening date for this, John?
Well, we want to get the thing open for the beginning of the 92 season. Yeah. So that's just before Easter of 92.
That's 15 months from now.
Yes.
I know we're talking about shock gags and the multiplicity of shock gags and the timing of the shock gags.
Yes.
Your gag about the hits...
What I fear most is that something that I design is not going to entertain people in the way that I have planned. So on that very first ride on the opening day, the visitors come off that ride with deadpan expressions on their faces. And I thought that I was in touch with what was going to amuse and entertain them. And in fact, I've been wrong. Put that one in.
The other shock one that I thought would be nice, that could build up as a shock. You're coming into an alleyway, anywhere like that, and you've arranged down the side a corridor like a concealed box, long box. In that box are huge claw hands, and they're about 4 or 5 foot, huge hands like that.
Right.
And they're on swing arms.
Right.
And as you hit that point, the first hand goes, the second one, they seem to be closing over. And as you're coming down, so the hands are grabbing
So
it.
they form a complete archway.
A tunnel of hands, and they all go,
Amusement parks have always existed, permanent amusement parks, and they have the facility to provide unique, special forms of entertainment that don't have to be portable, which is why the attractions you tend to get at good theme parks are not traditional fairground rides.
hand comes up, there's a scream.
Yeah.
What's happening here is really what happened in America 25 years ago. And we followed, done things slightly differently, but the route is the same, and I think the philosophy is the same. Fun fairs have got rather a discredited image. Unfair in some respects, but a discredited image. And people now are looking for a day's entertainment rather than just a couple of hours or an evening. And therefore the opportunity to visit places that have been well thought out, well done, well landscaped, well constructed, safe, good, wholesome environments, and exciting, has perhaps hastened more recently the decline of fun fairs.
Britain in Victorian times and at the turn of the century was a leader in almost everything. And so therefore they were a leader in transport. So you had transport railways going to the seasides, and people travelled long distances in Britain in those days. So then you had the traditional seaside amusement parks cropping up. The opportunity for pay one price theme parks, call them what you like, came through much wider car ownership, a much better motorway system. But Britain was, again, very late in developing good road links. The rest of Europe were much quicker, and obviously the United States had a very sophisticated freeway system.
I had this aunt and uncle, Uncle Tommy and Auntie Reenie, who had an act called Vadia and Dorinova and the Dive of Death. And this basically consisted of Uncle Tommy jumping from one of the stage boxes onto Auntie Reenie's shoulders. Now, after you've been doing this for a few years, you begin to get a bit worn into the ground. And they decided that when they were in there sort of getting on a bit, that they wanted to do something slightly less physical. And so they started an illusion act. And also, Uncle Tommy used to manufacture illusions for other magicians. And as a child, I used to go and visit them and was surrounded by all these wonderful cabinets and props and bits and pieces. And that really sparked my imagination and got my interest going in it. Now, if you want to float anything, this is the book to go for. The Encyclopedia of Suspensions and Levitations. There's some crazy ideas in here, going right back in history. Now, this one, you wouldn't do it like this nowadays, but this thing comes up through a trapdoor in the stage, up the bloke's trouser leg, and supports the girl in that way. I don't think anyone would use that method nowadays.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to introduce to you a sensational speciality act with Fire and Steel, Stromboli and Sylvia.
I mean, years ago, you went to a fairground and there was a boxing booth, there was a sword swallower maybe, a fire eater, jugglers, all the rest of it, a lot going on. And you could go into these various little booths all the way around at the same time you went up and you played all the machines. Well, now, that side has more or less died down. There's not so many places for them to go in like that. There's just mainly machines and various things to go around. If you haven't got a car today, you can't get to the leisure place unless you've got a bus. But, I mean, a lot of these small fairgrounds and circuses and that, they go right down into the villages, through into the mountains of Wales and places like that, and still perform.
Put your hands together for the great Stromboli and Sylvia.
Now this, believe it or not, is the haunted house. This huge steel building, which looks a bit like a Tesco's half completed, won't ever be seen by the visitors. All they see is this facade on the outside. The whole of the building is then hidden. In 9 months' time, this will be the interior of the haunted house. 1,800 people per hour will be pouring through this building. Doesn't look really particularly spooky at the moment. Basically, the cars that the people will be travelling around in are 6-seater cars that come through here at 10-second intervals. Every 10 seconds a car goes by, which means that all the ghosts and the apparitions have to do their thing and reset ready for the next car 10 seconds later, which puts quite a lot of demand on the mechanisms themselves. But we got it all well planned, and I'm sure it'll work in the end. While I was working in stage management at the Theatre Royal in Windsor, getting paid very little, as stage managers used to and still do, I hasten to add, get paid, Windsor is located more or less halfway between Pinewood Studios, where they were churning out James Bond films at the rate of about one every 18 months, and Bray Studios, where they were churning out Hammer horror films. This is in the late 60s. Hammer horror films at about one every 6 months. And I started augmenting my wages by building trick props and other bits and pieces for those studios. And in the end, I left the theatre and went into special effects full-time.
What does it matter to you? When you got a job to do, you gotta do it well. You got to give the other fella
I came to Barry in about 1974 because John Collins, who was a partner at Barry Island Pleasure Park, wanted me to redesign a ghost train, and knew me and knew that I'd done James Bond films and Hammer horror films, and thought that it might be a rather interesting project for me to do. And he approached me and I said, yeah, it's great between films. I'd love to do it.
We had a ride there called just simply the Ghost Train, which, to be frank, was far from creative, and certainly I don't think was capable of frightening anyone at that time at all. And John took a look at it, and he was very decent, very polite. He didn't sort of say horrid things, which he could have done. And to cut a long story short, we then embarked on revamping this ghost train and turning it into Uncle Frankenstein's Scream Machine.
The exciting thing was, when I'd done it, on the opening day, I stood by that thing and actually watched it entertaining people. Whereas when you work on a feature film, after you've done the work, and there's no audience in the studio, it has to be filmed and then dubbed and edited, and after about a year, it eventually finds its way into your local high street cinema, where it's projected on a screen. Whereas here were people that were actually having fun, watching or appreciating the sort of effects that we created in the film industry live. It was a live audience, and that was really back to my roots.
In the first year of operation of the Scream Machine as opposed to the old ghost train, the turnover of that device went up probably by 3 times, which is commercially a tremendous success.
So after that, I did the Wacky Goldmine ride. There was an existing ride at Barry Island which the owners wanted refurbished and upgraded. Now, that needed a lot of animated figures. And at that particular time, the only people in the world that had really developed sophisticated animation technology was Disney.
So I was bemoaning the fact, John, calm down. You can't possibly do a Disney in the UK. Disney throw millions and millions of dollars at that just at audio animatronics, let alone what they do with the rest of the attraction. And we just can't do it.
I thought, well, there's got to be a way of making animated figures far more realistic than we have at present, without them costing an absolute fortune.
So I arrived in the flat, and he said, oh, don't come in just at this moment. Would you just wait there for me? I thought, that's a bit odd behaviour, you know. Then shouted, well, you can come in now. And sitting in the corner was this figure with a guitar that proceeded to say good evening to me. Perfect sort of lip sync and everything else. I mean, I nearly collapsed.
Take that night train to Memphis, take that night train to Memphis. And when you arrive at the station...
It works by a digital computer that is programmed to be synchronized with the soundtrack, and then the signals come from the computer and cause him to move. But how he moves, we're not letting people know.
I'll be shouting...
The day after the Tomorrow's World programme went out, the phone never stopped ringing. All sorts of people, household names and obscure industrial companies, all wanted the technology for very, very different reasons. In one outfit, wanted me to build a lifelike moving robot to test incontinence wear, to see how leak-proof their incontinence wear would be. And they wanted something that could move about 24 hours a day, month in, month out, to see if it would develop any leaks.
I first heard of John Wardley and his animatronic figure in 1979. And this coincided really with progress at Madame Tussauds, whereby for some time we'd moved away from being an exhibition solely of a line of wax figures which people walk past, to having created sets. And these sets had lighting, and they had sound, music, and they got special effects. And they had, if you like, a time period to them. Now, the next thing from there, the next progression from there, would be to go into movement.
I'd managed to achieve what we call ramped movement. And what ramped movement is this? A robotic movement is like that. Whereas a human doesn't move that way. A human movement moves smoothly from rest up to a predetermined speed, and then it slows back down again to stop. And all our movements flow. A nod of the head, it's not that. but it's a smooth, ramped movement.
If you go back to 1979, there was only Disney had produced a moving figure. John took some piece of plywood, 2 door hinges, a few bed springs, a compressor, and a small computer, and he put together a figure that moved. Now, when we saw this, I mean, it's rather like seeing Wright Brothers' aeroplane made of canvas and strings. It isn't the fact that it's made of canvas and strings, it's the fact that it flew. What John had made was a figure that would move for a period, but wouldn't move for, say, 6 hours every day of the week. And that was the kind of requirement we would need. So that we worked together, we worked with an engineering company, and in 1983, we opened at Windsor railway station Royalty and Empire, which was an exhibition I was designing at the time. And so we built into that a moving show, and this incorporated 7 moving figures and 1 moving dog. The very first show, on the front row, was a little boy of about 7. And we have in the Royalty and Empire show Queen Victoria. When she stood up, this little 7-year-old ran.
She gave her name to the age. Her name was Alexandra.
That's my dears, and you've conquered human nature.
I thank my beloved people. May God bless you.
Well, we've just had this delivered. We've now got to do a feasibility study on whether we can get the astronaut to jump down to the lunar surface and reset at the same time.
Since that original John Wardley prototype, as it were, we've moved on in a whole host of ways. We've got to understand different forms of technology in animation that allow us to do different things. Pneumatics as well as hydraulic controls and drives are important to us, different forms of springing. We've even developed acrylic eyes and the way we control those. The cost of an animated figure for us is something that firstly presents us with a challenge in truly identifying what it is, because every time we make one, it's unique, and therefore we need to set about a different puzzle. But anything between £30,000 to £60,000 a figure is certainly not out of the question in terms of taking on the challenge of getting Phil Collins to play the drums as we do at Rock Circus.
It's way beyond me now. I can hardly understand how it all works, although I still get involved in programming the figures.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. In the word tries to break forever. That's a mighty long time, but I'm in fact. Punch your higher floor. Come on, let me get a bit of break. Let's go.
Alton Towers is perceived as Britain's finest theme park. It is not heavily themed. It has probably the best rides in Britain, almost certainly the best rides in Britain, probably the best rides in Europe. But they're not, at the moment, particularly heavily themed, whereas there are other attractions which have less spectacular rides, where more money is devoted to creating an illusionary environment.
Well, what we found is that an awful lot of people in the early days were very prepared to kind of buy into the whole idea of what Alton Towers was about. You know, this place that you could come and there were lots of different things to do. However, what we have found as well is that there are a certain number of people who have it fixed in their minds that Alton Towers is a big fun fair in a wood and full of roller coasters and, if you like, for the teenage market. So we had to do something in '92 that didn't reinforce all of those misperceptions that people had. We had to do something that said to those people, it's not about roller coasters and white knuckle and teenagers, it's about a family park where you can come and there is something for everybody.
It's now Friday the 13th of December, and everything is spot on schedule, believe it or not. Sure, things are going to go wrong, but the weather has been very kind to us. It's just cold and frosty, and it's enabled us to be able to lay foundations, put all the track in around here. This will look like the bridge over the River Kwai on a rather smaller scale, but it will be a wooden trestle bridge over the Rapids Ride. The Katanga Canyon Rapids Ride goes through here, and the runaway train goes over the top. The Rapids Ride goes into the tunnel here, and the runaway train comes out of the same tunnel. Interaction between the two rides, you see. This is a pink knuckle ride, not a white knuckle ride. And the difference is that this gives thrills to everybody. It's not a terror ride, it's a happy fun ride. And the result is that grandmas and grandpas will take their grandchildren on this ride and have a lot of fun, but so will the teenagers. So this type of ride is unique in as much as it entertains a very wide spectrum of visitors. Damien? Are you going anywhere, or can I see you? Stay there.
Well, I can't sit down at a drawing board and just sort of formally come up with ideas. It just happens in the car, in the bath. When I'm least expecting these things, my mind just wanders and I think, oh, that would be fun, yeah, how can we do this? And what would amuse me? What would entertain me?
The thing is, the control panel for the Haunted House transit system is now in there.
Yes.
And I think presentation ought now be involved in... There's no one there.
Clive Stevens is off.
Oh.
Obviously, I take existing theme park technology, the basic tools being what we call transit systems, so that's things that move you along. But then what I have to do is more or less shut that out of my mind and just imagine different themed adventures, themed environments, where I could utilize that equipment, but without the equipment really being to the fore. And I can honestly say I'm never short of ideas.
With that humpback, there's going to be a tendency to lift off your seat. And I'm just wondering if we can put a beam, obviously well clear, that you go under, but as you come up over the hump, it will be straight in your line of vision. Is there any chance of doing something like that? That's great.
Well, before I actually tell anybody of my ideas, I have to make sure that they will be practical. Firstly, from a safety standpoint, because safety is without doubt the first consideration. If it's not 101% safe, we forget it. The next thing is that of capacity. There's no point whatsoever in developing a wonderful attraction that tens of thousands of people are going to come flocking every day to see if it only has a capacity of, say, 100 people an hour. We have to get huge numbers of people through these rides, of the order of at least 1,000 and hopefully 2,000 people per hour. So once I know that the idea is going to be safe and that it can then efficiently handle people, then I start working up the idea in more detail, working up the concept and the theme, where it is going to go, how big it is, roughly how much it's going to cost. There's no point in coming up with a brilliant idea if you find it's going to cost £50 million and you have a budget of 2. You might as well forget it. Then I go to the board and I say, gentlemen, I've got an idea. This is it. And I will show them sketches, I'll show them models, I'll give them a very rough indication of cost. And they will turn around and say, you're crazy, but we'll do it.
When we start thinking about additional effects, Keith, I'd rather for the time being we concentrate on the problem of acoustics.
Right. Now, what I suggest that we do is to use heavy drapes of black molten twill.
Great.
Which we can then... Oh, in the past we've done all sorts of crackpot things. I mean, we've made exploding canaries and bagpipes that squirt porridge and man-eating desks and all sorts of daft things, really. And that's all part of our development as a company. We came from the world of puppets and magic, where the unexpected has to happen. All has to be original, new, crackpot, really. It's a wacky sort of world. But now it's also a very serious world. This is about heavyweight engineering. This is extremely sophisticated, expensive piece of work. You see millions of pounds here. It's very, very serious business indeed.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the backlighting here.
Right.
I want to use a very low-level backlighting up behind the fingers, and then a little bit of top for a little bit of front light. As they move, you'll get the huge
Is that
shadow.
going to be able to... That's not going to be able to go
That's
through
not fully
there, is
adjusted,
it?
John.
So you're going to have to...
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
it's not adjusted yet. Okay.
When I was about 7 or 8, I recreated an old fairground sideshow illusion called the Spider Girl, which I saw at Battersea Fun Fair when I was a kid and absolutely blew my mind. And eventually I worked out how it operated. And I bought the bits and pieces from junk shops, and I actually built it in the garage. And my father came home from work one day to see a queue of little kids queuing up at a card table outside the garage. And the little girl next door was sat at the card table charging the kids 4p. I'm not too sure why it was 4p, but 4p to go into this darkened garage where they could see this amazing spider girl, half girl, half spider.
We time it, as you know, you come through, the spider goes, bang, drop, okay? And then as it drops, the mantle of the spider also falls open. So you've got bang, crash twice. Okay?
Great. Good.
And it should be a good shock effect.
Good.
I think it's going to work well.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Then the Grim Reaper is up here,
Grim
isn't
Reaper,
he?
yes, yes it is indeed.
Facing in which direction? That way or this way?
This way.
This way?
Yes.
Right.
There is less necessity to decor that section.
Right.
Because you're not going to look through there.
No, no, true.
Okay. Then through on here.
Is that going to be vac formed up there? What's...
Yeah, there's a bit was more work, more decoration work to be done on there.
The true theme park philosophy takes the visitor and puts them in another time or another place in a totally illusionary environment where all the rides and attractions are faithful to that theme.
Good morning, Chessington World of Adventures.
House is clear and they're coming in quite smoothly. Over.
Vampire's open, Dragon River's open, Bubbleworks is going to be a few minutes late.
Madame Tussauds owned Chessington Zoo, and they decided that they wanted to expand and move ahead into the 21st century. And they approached me, knowing that I was involved in amusement rides and also associated with them, and said, what can we do to the old fun fair at Chessington? And I said, well, you really can't do anything much to the old fun fair at Chessington. You've really got to take a much broader look at it and consider much more innovative rides and attractions and features. And they said, OK, come up with a plan. And that kind of took me aback. I didn't think that they would say that. And I came up with a scheme, and that was more or less what was built.
We wouldn't have been interested in just developing a ride park, however exciting that might have been, because there's nothing particularly unique in a ride park. And John Wardley persuaded us that heavy theming was the thing to make it unique.
I must admit I was quite taken aback when they said, right, OK, we're doing it, because it involved huge capital expenditure of about £10 million. I felt that an awful lot rested on my shoulders. You know, have I got it right? Am I really in touch with what the British public want? Because you have to plan so far in advance, you have to anticipate by 3 or 4 years what people are going to want. And I thought, you know, if I've got it wrong, boy, am I in trouble. And so consequently on opening day, my old heart was really fluttering. I just didn't know whether people were going to like it. And thank goodness they did, in a big way.
Theming turns a fairground ride or a regular amusement park ride into a special experience. It takes the visitors for just a few minutes, or in the case of a whole theme park, a few hours, to another time and another place. And it is what escapism is all about. And that's all this is. We're not trying to pretend that we're now in a
Thai jungle. Sure, we're in the middle of the Surrey countryside, but at the same time, it's a bit of fun.
The average family of four will spend about £50 to £60 on a day at a park like Chessington. That includes obviously getting here, the petrol money, the ticket to get in, which is maybe about £30 to £40 for all four. Plus they'll spend money on food and drink and souvenirs in the day.
I want money. That's what I want.
We don't force them through the shop, but it's certainly made quite clear that that is the ideal way through. And they're given the choice to buy souvenirs which are themed for each of the areas.
After we had completed phase 1 at Chessington, we made a problem for ourselves because we had such a success on our hands that people were turning up in vast numbers and we needed to increase our capacity. And we felt that a roller coaster of some kind was the right thing. But there aren't very many things you can do with a roller coaster in the way of theming. You can turn it into a runaway train, you can put it in the dark and make out you're travelling through space. But there was one new piece of technology that had just come out in the States, and that was the suspended roller coaster, where the thing hangs from the track. And that gives the illusion of flight. So I thought, right, flight. How can we get a theme to do with flight? Well, birds, well, no. Then I thought, bats. Vampire bats. Dracula. Transylvania. Asking for it. But then I had to think of other ways to develop the Transylvanian theme as being a cute, pretty little mid-European village, all lederhosen and hanging baskets and everything.
I thought every German town has its brewery, its Hofbrauhaus. So what about a wacky, crazy tour of a brewery? Then I thought, well, no, not brewing beer. What about brewing fizzy pop that had magical properties? And so the Bubble Works was born. Professor Burke's Bubble Works is a tour through his fizzy pop factory to see how he makes his magical fizzy pop. Simple as that. When we were considering the actual processes of testing the pop over there, that is the fart tester that tests the fartability of the pop. Now, we actually had a board meeting to discuss whether we could use the word fart. Oh, that was a good one, Matt. And hiccups as well. Now, the Americans couldn't possibly do that. They couldn't use those kind of words. Basically, I think the British sense of fun is a lot more spontaneous and a lot less precious to the American sense of fun. And I believe in capitalising on that. Attention to detail and authenticity is so important. In this ride, we spent quite a few thousands of pounds just perfecting the smell of oranges, or perfecting these fountains, so that you can actually go under the water as we are now and hardly get wet. We're going under quite a few thousand gallons an hour of water, and hardly getting wet. And it's very authentic.
This is really the culmination of about 750 people's work on this site. And it's quite an exciting moment when the first people really get to ride this runaway train.
Sometime, I think...
Someone's got to ride it, yes. Yeah.
As good a time as any.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just watch it come out the tunnel.
Yeah.
We'll give it a go.
Yeah. You've watched it going through the tunnel from inside?
From inside, yeah. I just want to watch it go through the tunnel from on the train.
Yeah.
Although we've had the thing going around the track, from a technical point of view, it works fine. It's really the quality of the ride, the dips and the turns and the emotions that we're going to actually create in our visitors' minds when they ride it. So this is the apprehensive part for me. Is it as I imagined it was going to be? It's whether it works from an entertainment point of view.
It's more intense than I imagined. This is fantastic. And this dip into the tunnel, unbelievable. Wow. We're going to have to do a bit of pruning of some of the trees, I think. And I think a bit of extra props and dressing around here. There.
Just the job.
Before our visitors come in here through the front door, they walk through a graveyard where they're hopefully entertained, but in actual fact we use this as a way of providing a pleasant area for our queue. And then before they board the ride, they come through the drawing room of the haunted house, which again acts as a buffer before we actually get to the ride transit system itself. In this doll's house, for example, there is the little ghost of Sir Emily Alton walking through the rooms of the doll's house. The eyes on the pictures follow you around the room. The pages of the book turn. And in the fireplace, in the flames of the fire, is the sinister face of the ghost of Sir Henry Alton.
Are your furtive, frightened minds playing tricks inside your brain?
This is the transit system that the visitors ride around the haunted house in. Each one of these vehicles has cost us over £18,000, more than the average family car, and we have 32 of these. They're very complicated. Each one has a computer on board that senses its position around the track and actually talks to each of the computers on the other cars. We've had quite a lot of trouble with this, sorting this computer system out. But hopefully we've got it all sorted out now and it's running smoothly. And in about an hour, our celebrities and VIPs will be coming to open it. And then I've done my job and I sit back and watch it all work.
I was very much into the film Edward Scissorhands, so it was absolutely brilliant. And so I decided to make these hands. I can't really give you a short back and sides because it's actually cardboard. I've not got the real thing, because it was originally made for a fancy dress do, and they wouldn't let us in the nightclub with real scissors.
It's the people that were doing all this. They've pushed the cars and completely knackered up all the blocks. We'll get it clear, all right, Alan, but what's the next one that needs clearing? 9? Sorry? 9 and 55. Nine and 55 are both clear.
It's absolutely terrifying! The haunted house itself, if you were thinking of having a go, covers an area about the size of a football stadium. There are, however, some very strange, spooky and extremely frightening goings-on. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it is about time to declare this magnificent ride open.
You couldn't take everybody and put them in the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden and expect them to enjoy an opera. You couldn't take everybody and put them in a bingo hall and expect them to enjoy bingo. Whereas what we do, you can get most people and you can give them a bit of fun. I always get on a bit of a low once things have opened. But then I start thinking for new ideas. I start thinking, right, where do we go from here? So I'm going to put my thinking cap on. I've already got a few ideas. And this is where we really start the next one.
My favourite one of all was the wall, which suddenly just had faces in the wall, and that suddenly came to life, and that was very exciting.
You have bits flying above you and walls coming in on you, and I don't know, it's just a bit spooky.
You're going along and you feel like something's going to hit you, so you have to crawl underneath. You feel really stupid, actually.
Fantastic, where do you can open your eyes with the hailstones coming at you?
Well, it's fast.